Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 25 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the New York Rangers, in which the Sharks have lost 6-5. And this game will likely end up going down as one of the more favorite games amongst Sharks fans in this regular season. That is because it hits on multiple points that a fan, or at least a Sharks fan, will be looking for from any particular game this year. And that is, first of all, that the Sharks actually managed to score multiple goals in a season that has been otherwise filled with a lot of shutout losses or one-goal losses. To see the Sharks actually put up 5 goals here tonight is quite exciting. It is quite fun. You always want to see your team score some goals. The second point that it hits on is that this ends up being a competitive game. The Sharks go back and forth, blow for blow, with one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference thus far this season in the New York Rangers. But amongst all reasons, the most important thing for a Sharks fan here in this game and in every game moving forward is that they see the Sharks lose. This is what a lot of people are looking for, because they want the Sharks to get the absolute best possible pick in the upcoming entry draft at the end of this season. If it's not first overall, they're hoping at the very least for it to be top 2, top 3, and with that, the Sharks have to maintain a last place, or at least an extremely close to last place spot. And so to see the Sharks play a competitive game where they score a lot of goals, it keeps you excited, it keeps you invested at the edge of your seat the entire 60 minutes, and on top of that, the Sharks generate 0 points in the standings at the end of the day. That pretty much hits on every possible point that a Sharks fan will be looking for. Moving on to how this game actually went, the Sharks started off quite well, and this has been a theme for San Jose ever since that Seattle game a couple of weeks ago where the Sharks had a really bad start. They've been a lot better to open these games, and while it doesn't necessarily lead to wins every single time, it's nice to see the Sharks come out with a strong 5-10 or so minutes where they limit the opportunities that the opposing team manages to get. And this is another one of those games. The Sharks actually scored the first goal here from Anthony Duclair to make it 1-0 San Jose. That lead would not last particularly long, as the Sharks would take back-to-back penalties, and Panarin would score his first of 3 goals to tie it up at 1. The Sharks would take the lead back to make it 2-1 before it's tied up at 2, and then even a Rangers lead 3-2, and that is the score at the end of the first period. In the second, the Sharks would score a power play goal of their own coming from Jacob McDonald as he continues his mini hot streak to tie it up at 3, but then Cooley would make it 4-3 Rangers and get them another lead going into the final 20 minutes of the game. And in the third period, this is where things opened up a lot more, and it seems as though this game was going to get away from San Jose as they were giving up multiple grade A opportunities to the Rangers. Panarin would complete the hat trick, and Keandre Miller would make it 6-3 New York, and it felt as though that would be just the sort of the final nail in the coffin for the Sharks game tonight, which would have otherwise still been relatively positive outing for this team. But the Sharks kept it interesting. Not only would they get a goal from Zetterlund, but a minute later a goal from Barabanov would bring this to within 1 and allow the last few minutes to actually be quite interesting to watch, as the Sharks would pull their goaltender and go for the 6-on-5 situation. They really have not had pretty much any success in a 6-on-5 situation thus far this season, and that didn't change here tonight. But a 1-goal game is obviously going to be more exciting ending than a 3-goal game, and so even though this ends up being a 6-5 loss, it's pretty much everything that a Sharks fan would have hoped for from a game. Moving on to the players to talk about, we have the top line of Eklund, Hertl, and Barabanov. That's right, Barabanov returns to the lineup here tonight, and I was very excited to see where he'd get placed. I really thought it would be on the first line, which it ended up being, as Hoffman gets demoted down all the way to the 4th line, and so I was very excited to see the trio of Eklund, Hertl, and Barabanov work together. Especially since, as we know, Hertl and Barabanov have a historic chemistry with them. They've been playing together for a decent amount of time over these last few seasons, so I thought immediately they'd be able to come out the gate strong. But that definitely didn't happen. In the first 2 periods, this line did very little, and Barabanov was perhaps the liability in those first 40 minutes, as it felt as though every single time he touched the puck in the offensive zone, he would make the incorrect play with it, whether that be passing it to literally nobody in particular, passing passing it to a player but having it be behind them so that they couldn't catch it cleanly, or just taking a weak shot or losing a battle along the boards, Barabanov had a very rough start. Now, this isn't to forgive the two other players on his line. Hertl was much more similar to his early parts of the season, Tomas Hertl, and Eklund, while still doing some decent things defensively, though on the Cooley goal, the Rangers' fourth goal, he were probably hoping for a bit of a better back check. His offensive play was definitely struggling in those first two periods. However, the one sort of a thread of hope, I guess you could say, from this game is that in the third period, this line was definitely a lot better. They generated a couple of strong offensive zone shifts, got some chances for themselves. Obviously, Barabanov scored his first goal of the season here tonight, so generally it does give some hope moving forward into the last few games of this road trip that this first line is going to get some chemistry generated, and we shall see, if kept together, how they do moving forward. When it comes to the second line, this is really the one where the Sharks are getting a lot of their offensive contributions. There are some issues defensively with this line for sure. Duclair had a lot of really bad moments in the defensive zone, some poor coverage, some bad giveaways that actually led directly to a couple of Rangers goals. That much is true, but from an offensive standpoint, this line is doing a ton for the San Jose Sharks. Duclair is finally showing off that maybe not elite skill, but that really good skill level that the Sharks were hoping to get when they originally acquired him in the offseason from the Florida Panthers. He, of course, contributes a goal on that breakaway to open up the scoring in this game. Mikael Granlund, who I've heralded as a strong playmaker, is finally making use of that. It was in the earlier parts of the season where he was having those struggles, where a lot of times when he would go for those bold and risky plays, they would not pay off, and so they would just look really, really bad. In these last couple of games, they actually have been working out, which makes Granlund look like an absolute genius a few times per game. And so he's been a fantastic complement to Duclair, and that is making up definitely a dynamic duo for the San Jose Sharks. Zetterlund, sort of the odd man out, but still doing a very good job on this second line, managed to score this goal that got the Sharks to within 2 and got the sort of mini comeback started for San Jose. And so while the first line was floundering at times this game, the second line was holding up the majority of the offense. When it comes to the third line, we have Carpenter, Labanc, and Justin Bailey, because Nico Sturm was actually out with an injury this game, meaning Carpenter bumps up from fourth line center to third line center, especially since Luke Kunin is also still injured. And this third line actually looked quite good. For his second straight game, Labanc was doing a lot of very good things, and the types of things that you would expect David Quinn would hope from him in the offensive zone. He's very aggressive along the boards, something that we don't usually see from Kevin Labanc, which actually allows the forecheck to continue. So it is quite impressive to see Labanc contribute in this fashion, and his play along the boards actually would eventually lead to the Ryan Carpenter goal, which is the goal that made it 2-1 in the first period. Now, of course, this goal wasn't anything impressive. It's more so bad goaltending from Jonathan Quick that this puck ever actually hit the back of the net, but it was still some strong work in the offensive zone for this trio, and so some credit does need to go towards them for that. Carpenter getting bumped up to the from the fourth line to the third line also saw him get in a more expanded role in this game, playing a bit more defensive zone shifts. And while we did see some issues in that regard, as he when playing against the really top players in the league, like the Rangers do have with Zibanejad and Panarin and Kreider, he was slightly exposed. I'd say he did an okay enough job, I guess. And then when it comes to the fourth line, definitely one of the weirder fourth lines we've ever seen the San Jose Sharks ice. First of all, the centerman for this line is Mike Hoffman, who is not a center. I don't think Mike Hoffman has really ever played center in his entire career, if I'm not mistaken, so this was definitely a strange position to see him in. Then we have McDonald, who, of course, while he has been playing forward for San Jose, is technically a defenseman, so two players who are just completely out of their actual normal role. And then, of course, Giovanni Smith, who is, a fourth-line player, but it just makes up a very odd fourth line for San Jose. They were okay, I guess. They got like a chance, maybe 2 chances in this game, and of course McDonald, though on the power play, does end up contributing a goal. But I would say that the best thing about this line for tonight is that they were not really a liability, and considering the Sharks are dealing with a ton of injuries at this point, even with the return of Barabanov to the lineup, that's kind of what you would hope for from the Sharks' fourth line. Moving on to the defense tonight, we had another injury step out and another injury step in, as it is Emberson who jumps out of the lineup due to being banged up, I guess, from last game, and it is Jan Ruda who returns to the lineup here tonight. On the first pairing, we have Ferraro and Burrows. Now, Burrows is an important player to point out because the fact that he finds himself on this first line makes me think that, or on this first pairing, makes me think that he was actually the odd man out if Emberson were actually available to play. I imagine Emberson would have maintained his spot on the top pairing with Ferraro, and Burrows would be that healthy scratch. Now, I originally thought that it would come down to either Burrows or Okhotyuk, and while I would have been more willing to bench Okhotyuk in this position, it's not that much of a surprise that David Quinn would choose to go with Burrows because he really seems to like what Okhotyuk brings to the table, and so Burrows seems to be that seventh defenseman penciled in there. Now, did his performance here tonight against the Rangers bail him out in that way and allow him to keep his spot if Emberson were to, let's say, be healthy for the next game? Probably not. While he did have a very good go-ahead pass to Duclair for his breakaway goal that made it 1-0 San Jose, his defensive zone play was not particularly good, even paired on this top pairing with Ferraro, who is at least slightly better than his usual defensive pairings these nights. And so Burrows definitely seems to be the guy who could easily end up as that seventh defenseman here for the San Jose Sharks. When it comes to his pairing partner, Mario Ferraro, this is something I've pointed out multiple times with Ferraro this season. It's just a very strange situation because he feels like an offensive defenseman who is trapped in the body of a player who does not know how to play offense at all, because Ferraro will multiple times make a nice move at the blue line, or he'll find himself in some open ice because he makes a smart pinch or he reads the play well, and then immediately will just like turn his brain off and make the absolute worst and terrible offensive play that you could possibly imagine in that particular position. And so what it ends up being is that Ferraro gets pretty much 0 points, even though based on what you see from his game, you would expect at least a couple of assists here or there. It's just that for whatever reason, he can never actually finish off the plays that he starts. And that was indeed the case here tonight. There was this one very nice move that he made at the blue line that completely undressed the Rangers defender and got him so much open ice, and he just didn't really do anything with that puck. Otherwise, it just ended up being a very basic play for the San Jose Sharks. So I would definitely like to see Ferraro actually be able to boost up that offense by actually finishing off the plays that he does start. When it comes to the second pairing, we have Addison and Benning, and a bit of a tale of two games between these players, because while Benning, I thought, had a pretty bad outing, I don't think Benning was any good tonight from a defensive standpoint, which has been a bit of a disappointment considering he was actually quite overperforming last season with the San Jose Sharks. But on the other hand, his defensive partner Calen Addison massively improved from his two previous games. Against Boston, he was not good at all, but then against New Jersey, he definitely was a bit better. Here tonight, he was much better, because not only did he make some solid defensive plays, but Addison was contributing offensively, and this is what the Sharks need from Calen Addison on a consistent basis. Similar to what I mentioned about Mario Ferraro, Calen Addison also had a beautiful move near the blue line to undress a Rangers defender, but he actually managed to do something with that. He had a beautiful pass that led to the Barabanov goal, directly led to the Barabanov goal that made this one 6-5. He was doing some good things on the power play. He was looking a lot more confident and secure with the puck throughout pretty much the entirety of this game, and so Addison was a big positive for the Sharks. And then when it comes to the third defensive pairing here, we have Okhotyuk paired with Jan Ruda. A return for Ruda from injury, like I mentioned. He had some good things in this game. For instance, a pretty decent pass that led directly to the Ryan Carpenter goal that would make it 2-1 San Jose. But from a defensive standpoint, a bit of bad gap control. For instance, why I did mention earlier on that Eklund likely should have been able to keep up with Cooley in this situation on the back check. Ruda also should have played a much harder play onto Cooley to not allow him to really break free for this essential breakaway that made it 4-3 Rangers. And so Ruda still definitely has some issues. Felt a little bit slow mentally at times in this game, where he was just not picking up on plays all that quickly, but I guess he wasn't all around all that bad, so that's a bit of a positive there. When it comes to Okhotyuk, I will say a notable improvement for him. Still, like, I believe there was maybe 1 or perhaps 2 giveaways in this game that were not very good, but I thought generally his defensive positioning here tonight was a bit better than it has been in the past. Some issues just generally throughout this entire game, not for specifically him, but through this defensive core where the Sharks were not tough enough to play against in front of their own net. That was something that they were very good at, and even the Boston game and definitely against the New Jersey Devils the other day, is that the Sharks were not really giving a lot of second and third opportunities here tonight. The reason why the Rangers actually managed to score 6 goals is that more often than not they could get those second and third whacks at the puck in the crease, and Okhotyuk as well as many of the other defensemen here were just not doing a very good job at cleaning things out, the forwards as well. But when it gets back to Okhotyuk, I thought he was okay enough. And so I guess that's pretty good considering he's been previously quite bad. And then finally we have the goaltender here, Mackenzie Blackwood. Obviously he lets in 6 goals. That's never going to look particularly good. And I do think Blackwood probably could have had a couple of these. You know, few of them didn't really have much of a chance on. The first Panarin one he doesn't see. The last couple of Panarin ones are just scrambles in front, sure. But 6 goals, it's hard to really point out as, oh, he had a good game. It's just the Sharks didn't really bail him out. So perhaps not the best outing for him. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Tuesday, where they will take on the New York Islanders as they continue this 6-game road trip, still staying on the East Coast. They beat the New Jersey Devils. They lost to the New York Rangers. And so this next New York team, will they win? Will they lose? We shall see. Class dismissed.